Leaders gathered in Washington today for the annual National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. The nonpartisan gathering focused on the role of the Catholic faith in American history as the nation prepares for its upcoming 250th anniversary.
This year's theme, One Nation Under God, celebrating the Catholic contribution to America's 250 years.
Though a minority, Catholics have been patriots woven into America's story since 1776. Through waves of immigration, Catholics strengthened this nation. They built hospitals, orphanages, and schools, caring for the poor and marginalized when help was scarce. For 250 years, the Catholic Church hasn't just lived in America. It helped fortify America, from modest beginnings and ascending to the highest offices in civil society and the Church. American Catholics have served their country. They fought for freedom abroad, championed civil rights and human dignity at home for the unborn, and answered the call to the common good. It is a faith that salutes the flag while praying for the nation. In 2026, as we celebrate 250 years, we honor the Catholic Church's enduring role in this great American story. May God bless the Catholic Church in the United States. May God bless the United States of America.
National Catholic Prayer Breakfast stands as a visible reminder that faith and public life are not separate.
We commend to your mercy the souls of the founding fathers and all past presidents. We entrust to the protection of your Mother Mary, those serving in our armed forces, and to her intercession, civil discourse in our nation and lasting peace in our world.
For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world.
Holy Father writes to the participants, with these sentiments I entrust all of those present to the intercession of Mary Immaculate and Saint Joseph, her most chaste spouse.
Hallow is the #1 Catholic app in the world. Hallow has made it not only easier for people who already know how to pray more easily, but for those who are unfamiliar with structured prayer, to learn how to do that in a completely accessible and non-threatening way.
This message from President Trump. My administration remains firmly committed to defending the right of every Catholic to worship God freely and without fear. Last year, I proudly instituted the White House Religious Liberty Commission to safeguard and promote America's founding principle of religious freedom, with members including Catholic luminaries like Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Bishop Robert Barron.
Some might say this notion of spiritual freedom belongs to the private sphere. It is a matter of personal practice and not of public affairs. Some might even argue that to debase matters of religion to those of politics is to muddy the waters of public discourse with pious sentiments. One of the most prominent voices of the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson, a deist and one of the founders most influenced by the Enlightenment thinkers, Jefferson nevertheless wrote just 5 years after drafting the Declaration, "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we remove their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God?" And to that question, Jefferson and his fellow founders would have said no. Rights, as understood by the drafters of the Declaration and the Constitution, are not conjured into existence by political consensus, nor are they granted by parliaments or princes. Our rights exist not on parchment alone, but on the immutable foundation of the laws of nature and nature's God. That is to say that even if the drafters of the Constitution disregarded a fundamental right to life, the American people, just like every people across history, can claim a share of that right, or that gift, as Jefferson recognized, because of the basic fact that life comes not from the government, but from God. This is the animating principle behind what the founders called natural rights. Rights inherent to the human person, not because of race or wealth or nationality, but because of the dignity bestowed by the Creator. As Alexander Hamilton put it 1 year before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power. In our day, I fear that we are at risk of losing this metaphysical grounding of a person's rights. There seems to be no limit to the number or kinds of rights individuals can claim. Rights have become assertions of will, often severed from truth or justice. Sadly, deeply immoral acts are often defended under the banner of individual rights. But I would posit to you that this conception of rights is really a misconception. Rights do not exist just because we say they do. And here I call to mind one of my intellectual heroes, St. Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas rarely spoke of rights in the plural. Instead, he referred to the Latin word jus, which means the right, understood not as a claim, but as that which is due to another. In Thomistic terms, a right is what justice demands, as measured by the divine order. By this he meant something in accord with God's design for mankind and the universe. This is a far more substantive and sobering understanding of rights. It places rights not in the realm of popular preference or ever-evolving societal demands, but in the realm of respect for the human person and the common good. At the same time, the natural law tradition insists that these principles of freedom, justice, rights, and responsibilities are not hidden from us. On the contrary, these fundamental truths are accessible to all, discoverable by natural reason, written, as St. Paul says, in their hearts. This is precisely the claim made in the opening of the Declaration of Independence, that the American cause is justified not by majority will nor sectarian creed, but by the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Importantly, the Declaration's appeal to the British is not a democratic one. The colonists did not declare political independence from their ancestral homeland simply because the majority agreed. No, the appeal of the Declaration was fundamentally moral and philosophical. It was a practical application of moral reason to political grievance. In the estimation of the signers of the Declaration, British governance had devolved from stewardship into tyranny. In fact, they all agreed in the Declaration that the Crown involved itself in circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. This claim is not for mere rhetorical flourish. Rather, it signals a moral judgment. The abuses of the Crown were more than an inconvenience. They were a grave injustice. The signers of the Declaration committed a revolutionary act, one that led to a devastating war. Yet they acted to restore the moral law that had been lost, the rights that we are given by God. And while it's impossible for us to know the thoughts within the hearts and minds of men, I believe it was the conscience, the inner witness of the divine law that stirred many of the founders to affix their names to the Declaration. Conscience is the key to understanding how the founders accessed the truths of the eternal law and applied them to their circumstances. The Second Vatican Council in Gaudium et Spes describes conscience as the most secret core and sanctuary of a man. There he's alone with God, whose voice echoes in its depths. The founders' defense of the colonists was not only an act of courage, but one of justice. Prior to America's founding, many nations only recognized the rights of a privileged few. But the Declaration laid the foundation for recognizing the rights of all Americans. Now, this promise of liberty was not fulfilled instantaneously. It took a bloody civil war and many courageous abolitionists to end the sin of slavery and respect the dignity of all persons. But from the very beginning, our founders understood that rights do not exist within a vacuum. With every right comes responsibilities to our families, our fellow citizens, and our Creator. In other words, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness does not render the political order neutral on questions of good and evil. It does not leave us in a naked public square, to use Father Richard John Newhouse's famous phrase. Rather, it presumes that citizens are moral actors, capable of discerning the good and obligated to pursue it. The Founding Fathers anticipated that the American people would not passively receive dictates from the state as distant subjects, but that they would actively participate in moral and political deliberations as citizens. This is why George Washington famously said in his farewell address, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens." Today, nearly 250 years after the birth of our republic, we find ourselves the recipients of this great moral inheritance. For if our rights are real, then so too are our responsibilities. To be an American citizen is to be entrusted with the freedom to pursue the good, the duty to care for our neighbors and uphold justice, and the burden and the privilege of conscience. May we prove worthy of it.
Last December, I was the first president to commemorate the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Today, I am also proud to be the first president to honor the Feast of St. Joseph in recognition of one of the greatest saints to ever live. And I'm pleased to say and report that just last night, Congress gave unanimous consent to set aside this May 17th as a National Day of Prayer and Fasting. Hatred toward Jewish people is ugly, despicable, an affront to the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Guest speaker Dr. Brad Berzer and keynote speaker Michael Knowles both spoke about how Catholics helped shape America.
Roman Catholicism baptized common law. It professed liberty through the Magna Carta. It advanced natural law and natural rights through the Jesuits. And it helped inspire the Declaration of Independence.
America would come not only to tolerate Catholics, not only to appreciate the contributions of Catholics, but even to elect them. On this 250th anniversary of our country, I would, at the risk of extravagance, go even further to observe America's intrinsically Catholic character. If the claim sounds outrageous, please do not blame me. A man with greater authority than I made it first. That would be Alexis de Tocqueville, the most insightful and influential analyst of the American political order, who foresaw all the way back in 1831 that over time, the overwhelmingly Protestant Americans would trend in two directions when it came to religion. Some relinquishing Christianity entirely, in Tocqueville's words, and others returning to the bosom of the Church of Rome. Yet today, if you count vice presidents and first ladies, we have now had baptized Catholics in the White House for 17 consecutive years. What a surprise it must be to the ardent Calvinists who settled our country that America would come not only to tolerate Catholics, not only to appreciate the contributions of Catholics, but even to elect them. But by and large, the American Revolution proceeded in an orderly way, thanks entirely to its following the Catholic principle of subsidiarity. That is, it was conducted, in Aquinas' words, not through the private presumption of a few, but rather by public authority. The leaders of the revolution, the Founding Fathers, were men who had already been entrusted with public authority. They were legislators, they were judges. Not many were Catholic by profession, and yet, in retrospect, a distinctly Catholic character begins to appear. This impression is not illusory. It's not just wishful thinking in a room of 1,500 Catholics. We know a tree by its fruit. Catholics today make up a little over 20% of the U.S. population, but we make up 28% of congressmen, 38% of governors, and at least 2/3 of the Supreme Court. We will hit 78% of the Supreme Court whenever we drag Justice Gorsuch back across the Tiber. It's not, the water is warm, Mr. Justice, whenever you want to come back. Not only is the sitting Vice President Catholic, but every presently viable candidate for president in 2028 of both parties is a baptized Catholic. Few of our forefathers could have predicted it. Only a firm faith in Providence could have permitted it, and yet here we find ourselves, a quarter millennium later, a people and a place so improbably and perfectly suited for each other that not only can a Catholic become president, but an American can even be the Pope. Thank you very much.
This year, the President's initiative, America Prays, invites every American to consider all of this again. And I'm so encouraged to see the Catholic prayer breakfast continue to heed that call, carrying on this important tradition for more than 2 decades now. So thank you all for that. Religion in the public square happens to be one of my favorite topics. It's one that I've debated and taught and written about for almost 30 years. I used to litigate these issues, and I've been a professor and taught this to the next generation coming behind us. I'm convinced it's one of the most misunderstood issues in American public life. I'm often criticized for invoking my faith, but I remind people that's not some innovative thing. It's what previous generations did. When I go to the little chapel right outside the Speaker's office in the Capitol to pray, they mock me for that. There are some very angry voices out there trying to convince us breathlessly that there must be a rigid separation between church and state. It's a phrase that's often repeated, as we know, but very rarely understood. That phrase, as you all know, derives from not the Constitution, but a personal letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Association. And in that letter, he explained that because, quote, religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, the First Amendment is a vital safeguard for our rights of conscience. Jefferson wrote that he revered that act of the American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Now they take that phrase and they turn it around. Jefferson clearly did not mean that wall to keep religion from influencing our government and public life. To the contrary, the founders wanted to protect the church and the religious practice of citizens from an encroaching state, not the other way around. Our founders understood that a free society and a healthy republic depend upon religious and moral virtue, not only because these things help prevent the abuse of power, but also because those convictions make it possible to preserve our essential freedoms. The father of our country, George Washington, famously said in his farewell address, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports." John Adams came next, our second president. He said, "Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." The founders wanted a flourishing of faith in the public square because they knew that religion and moral virtue strengthen our nation by encouraging and inspiring things like individual responsibility and self-sacrifice and civility, family and community, the dignity of hard work, the rule of law, and the sanctity of every human life. Without those virtues, indispensably supported by religion and morality, no nation can endure. There's a lot more I wanted to say to you this morning, but time is short. I could go on about these topics all day long, but it is an important reminder as we approach the 250th anniversary of our nation on July 4th. It's very important to remember those foundations because they are being attacked today, as we all know. As we rededicate ourselves to the cause of our founders, we should turn toward prayer again, just as they did. And why? Because it strengthens and fortifies this grand experiment in self-governance and liberty. Because it repairs the foundations that undergird the republic, and we do that because we have to remain as we always have, one nation under God. We do live in the greatest nation in the history of the world. It's not even close. We're the most free, most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation it's ever been, and it is because we are built on those foundations. And in order for us to keep this, you and I know that it's a spiritual battle.